Hello, I'm Evan Brand. Today we're talking about the triggers of Hashimoto's disease. First, I'm going to read you a couple of sentences from my friend Isabella Wentz's book, Hashimoto's Protocol, as an introduction to this topic. While Hashimoto's thyroiditis sounds like a rare and exotic disorder, the fact is that Hashimoto's is the most common autoimmune condition in the United States and worldwide, affecting anywhere from 13.4% to 38% of people within the general population. Of course, you know this, but I'm going to tell you it anyway. Synthetic thyroid hormones have topped the national drug bestseller list for the last 3 years, and most individuals taking thyroid hormones have Hashimoto's. My grandfather's been put on thyroid medicine. I'm sure someone in your family has been put on thyroid medicine. The problem is that's not addressing the root cause. If you take someone's gas pedal that's already been pushed to the floor and then you use a synthetic thyroid hormone to crank up their thyroid, it's not going to work. There's conversion problems that happen, especially when you're using something like levothyroxine, which is a T4-based synthetic drug. T3 is the active thyroid hormone. You can't just throw a bunch of T4 in and expect T3, the active thyroid hormone. You can't expect that conversion process to happen with the body. There's nutrient deficiencies at play. There's poor quality of the drugs themselves. There's gluten and other fillers and binders that are added to the drugs. Typically they're tablets and not capsules, which is another issue. And once again, it's not addressing the root. So if you have a diagnosis of Hashimoto's, you've run your TPO. This is how you figure this out. You run your TPO and your TG antibodies. Once you run these, this is how you can get a positive diagnosis of Hashimoto's. Now, you don't want to get TPO by itself. You want to make sure that you get the thyroglobulin and the thyroid pyridoxase antibodies, the TPO. You have to get both of these at the same time because there's reasons that TPO antibodies could be elevated, and that would indicate other types of autoimmune disease. So you've really got to get both of these. And once you see TPO and TG, once you see that these are both elevated, then you know that you've got Hashimoto's. Now, of course, the natural question becomes, well, how do you address the root cause? Well, first, you've got to figure out what are the triggers. Number one is going to be gluten and grains. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken with someone and they say, Evan, I've had a food sensitivity test done. It says that I'm not allergic to gluten, so I'm still eating it. That's a completely bad ideology, and here's why. Now, we can tell, based on all the literature, it's pointing to the fact that gluten, consuming gluten, that's the wheat protein. That's one of the proteins found in wheat that comes from gliadin. That's another one. Gluten can trigger antibodies. When you create these anti-gliadin IgA is what it's called, these are gluten antibodies, that can get confused. These antibodies, these specialized proteins, they get confused and they attack the thyroid gland by accident, and then boom, all of a sudden you've got Hashimoto's. So grains, gluten, those two have to come out of the diet if we're wanting to get someone's antibodies back down and put them into a state of remission. Number two is going to be chronic stress or trauma. So basically this could be acute or chronic stress. I had a woman who went through a divorce. After the divorce, we tested her thyroid. I just started working with her, so unfortunately I didn't have a before and after picture of the TPO and TG antibodies, but after the divorce is when I first started working with her, and I knew that she went through this massive period of stress. I ran the antibodies, they showed up high. So for me, trauma is going to be big. So car wrecks, divorces, losing your job, getting fired, separation, death of a loved one, all of these things can trigger these same antibodies. Now, does that mean you need to go hide in a bubble and just tune out the rest of the world? Not necessarily. There's different herbs and adaptogens that I use that can help the body adapt to stress, because ideally you want to be able to handle the stress that comes at you, not get overwhelmed and react or overreact to those situations. Now, chronic stress can be tied into this one. This marker is weird, isn't it? So gut infections, we'll talk about leaky gut in a second, and then blood sugar issues. If you're up and down, you're on this blood sugar roller coaster because you're eating a diet that's based on sugar and carbohydrates. Let's say you did a banana and gluten-free cereal for breakfast. You have no stability of your blood sugar. Your blood sugar is going to spike up, it's going to crash right back down, and you're going to have an issue. That's going to stress the adrenal glands. That's going to increase the sympathetic drive of your nervous system. You've got rest and digest, parasympathetic. You've got fight or flight, sympathetic. If your blood sugar is going up and down because you're eating sugars and carbohydrates, sympathetic mode's on. Your fight or flight. Blood sugar crashes. holy smokes, you're going to pass out. If the blood sugar gets too low, we got to crank the blood sugar back up, then it drops, then it goes up. Your nervous system cannot handle that. Our bodies are built for a fat-based diet. If you look at the history of humankind, you look at even the way that hunter-gatherers who still exist on this planet, what do? They're eating the fat from the animals. So this is a very important thing, is you have to stabilize blood sugar if you ever want a chance against getting these antibodies down, reversing your Hashimoto's. And then here we go into gut infections. There's several different bacteria that have been found to cause autoimmunity, especially Hashimoto's. So we've got Citrobacter, we've got Klebsiella, we've got Proteus SPP and Proteus mirabilis. These are 4 different species of bacteria that are autoimmune triggers, and they can actually trigger Hashimoto's. I've seen it all the time. Someone comes to me, they've already got their thyroid labs run, or I run the thyroid labs. If we find these antibodies, of course we've got to go look at the gut. So we're going to find Citrobacter, we're going to find Klebsiella. A lot of times we'll find H. pylori as well, which is a bacterial infection. The reason H. pylori is such a big issue is because it's going to damage the stomach lining, and it's also going to prevent your body from making adequate levels of enzymes and hydrochloric acid. Now, if you can't make stomach acid, what happens? Well, you've got undigested food. For one, now you've got nutrient deficiencies. You're not breaking down your food. And 2, where's that undigested food going to go? What's going to happen to it? Well, if you've got food rotting and putrefying in the gut because you're not digesting it well, because you've got H. pylori that's suppressing your stomach acid and enzymes, or something as simple as you doing this, scrolling on Instagram or scrolling on Facebook when you should be eating. So put the phones down, chew your food. I promise it's going to make your digestive process much better. You can't be in fight or flight. Oh my God, I missed out on this latest Instagram post, and I'm going to optimally digest this meal at the same time. It's not possible. It's one or the other. The nervous system can't do both things at the same time. So really, eating in peace is huge. But then, of course, you've got to address these underlying infections. You've got to get these treated. Now, herbs are what I use in my clinic because antibiotics, they simply don't work for H. pylori. I had a client that came to me a few weeks ago, and he did something called quadruple therapy, which I didn't even know existed. I thought we were using 3 antibiotics at the same time for H. pylori, which is called triple therapy, but apparently the success rate of that is so abysmal that now we're doing quadruple therapy with conventional medicine, which is 4 antibiotics at the same time, which we know causes permanent DNA damage. So I don't play with those unless my life was in danger. I would not touch antibiotics. In herbs, there's no side effects, and they work much better at eradicating infections. So you've got to get that taken care of. Now back to the food piece. The undigested food particles, those are going to separate these tight junctions in your gut. So it pulls apart. Stress can do this as well. Cortisol, the stress hormone, can pull apart these tight junctions. Now you've got these gaps in your fingers. This is where the undigested food particles are going to go. Now if that's gluten and grains, you're in big trouble. But if it's healthy food too, your avocados, your good meats, your good vegetables, organic as much as possible, those can still get into the bloodstream via leaky gut and then trigger the same autoimmune reaction. So a foundational program must address chronic stress, trauma, must address the adrenal glands, it must address the diet, fixing blood sugar while you're at it, and then also making sure that you're infection free. And you can watch over time that these antibodies just drop. And ideally, you get people below 5. That's the goal, 5 or less of both of these. I've seen people in the 50s. See, I don't know why this marker doesn't like me. I've seen people in the 50s. I've seen people into the 1,000 plus. And I've seen those numbers drop, and you can track those over time. So if you go to your conventional doctor, make sure you say, look, I want TPO and TG antibodies run. For those of you in Canada, I've heard it's much more difficult. I'm sorry. I don't know why they won't listen and run these for you. But if you're in the United States or elsewhere, hopefully your doctor or endocrinologist will run these 2 labs for you. Get the numbers, figure out what your numbers are, and then start working on all these root causes, all these triggers, and knock them out until they're no longer a problem. This is Evan Brand signing out. If you'd like to schedule a functional medicine consultation with myself, you can just click on screen here and visit my website to learn more about my clinic. Take care. Bye-bye.